So now we're gonna dive into some of the movies and TV shows that I've been watching over the past few months. I already talked about Murder on the Orient Express, so the only other movie that I saw in theaters this month was Wonder. This is an adaptation of the book by R.J. Palacio. I read it last year in one day at the very end of August, and I absolutely fell in love with the story. I think this book is so important because the message is just choose kind. To be kind to other human beings just because they may be different than you is so important. And seeing the cast for this movie, I immediately had to go and pick this book up. And I hate that that's the reason why I always go to read books, is because of the cast. But when you have an extremely amazing group of people that are telling such an important story, of course I'm gonna want to go and read this book. And really, I think all that matters is that I did get to read this book and then getting to see it on screen. I've been waiting for this adaptation for over a year, and I finally got to see it, and I absolutely loved it. The story was so beautiful. There was moments where I was crying, and I normally don't cry. I loved all the child actors in the story. I loved all of their plot lines, and I love that this movie adaptation, for the most part, was relatively faithful, but that it took the route of focusing on the emotional and social issues that Augie goes through with the facial deformity that he has, and having to like form friendships and having to be seen differently by people because of the way that his face looks and because he's apparently different than everybody else, when in reality he's just a completely normal boy. And I love seeing some of the moments where he breaks down because he is hurt, because this isn't anything that he can control. This is something that he was born with, and seeing now that his life is completely entirely affected by this, and people are going to look at him differently because of that, or that the movie took the time to focus on that rather than a lot of the more technical details of like what surgeries does he have to go through, because those things are mentioned in the book, because obviously when you have a book, the author's finished when they're finished telling the story, so they can add a lot of those smaller details in when they need to. I think that it's important for authors to do that because it just makes the story more developed and shows that they've done research. But with a movie adaptation like this, where you have a certain amount of time and you have a certain goal that you want to accomplish, I think that it was really important that they focused on that emotional response, because that's the big thing that everyone can get out of it, is just treating people respectfully. I love seeing Daveed Diggs in this movie. I just had to mention it. I was so excited when I found out that he was casted in this movie as Mr. Brown. I love the way that he played him. It just felt so cool and felt so Lafayette. I loved it. And Mandy Patinkin and Owen Wilson and Jacob Tremblay. Oh my god, such a good cast. I loved it so much. I loved getting to see R.J. Palacio's cameo towards the end of the movie. It's just the perfect heartfelt movie for families. It was so great, and I'm so glad that I got to see it, because it was just a perfect heartwarming film that I needed at the moment, and I absolutely adored it. So one of the other movies that I watched this month, I actually DVR'd, and that is Infamous. So this tells the story of Truman Capote and his process writing in cold blood. I read that book last month in my English class, and so I wanted to get to go and watch some of these adaptations of this book just to get a little bit more of a better perspective, because I really enjoyed the story, and I just wanted to immerse myself more in the world visually. And so I ended up seeing this one that was going to be airing on television, and so I DVR'd it, I went and I watched it, and my mind was blown. It completely entirely changed the way that I look at the book in just so many tiny little aspects, and I loved it. Toby Jones plays Truman Capote, and he did a phenomenal job. Like, the voice was there, the look was there, and I was so amazed. And I was looking at him and seeing like, okay, what else has he been in? He's freaking Dobby in Harry Potter! How did I not know that? Did anyone want to tell me how I didn't know that? I didn't, and I feel ashamed. Sandra Bullock is also in this movie, and she plays Harper Lee, because Harper Lee went with Truman Capote to investigate these murders when they were first broken in the papers. She was there with him initially when he first started crafting this story. Other names that are in this film that you may recognize: Sigourney Weaver is in it, and Jeff Daniels, who was in Ascendant, and he plays the head detective of the Clutter murders. I was very interested to see his take on the role, because I remember doing some initial reading about his person's response to the story, and I thought that it was really interesting to see that based off of what we knew about the actual living person, the way that he decided to portray that role. And I just loved the story. There were so many really interesting comedic moments that were crafted within this novel just because of Truman Capote and his air and the way that he appears, and Toby Jones played on that so beautifully. Also, there's some really crazy stuff that goes down that I just don't want to spoil, because I think that it's just so much more worth it to see on screen, because there were moments where I was seeing things things and having to pause and like scramble out of my seat because I was so wigged out because I read the book and just like seeing the way that those things actually played into the way that the story was told. Of course, we don't know how entirely truthful these things are because this movie is an adaptation of a book that somebody else wrote about Truman Capote's experience writing in Cold Blood. In this novel, I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it as much because it's just really underappreciated. It created the whole true crime genre that we know today for shows like CSI and the like. That's so important. The experiences that Truman Capote went through in creating this novel are insane. And seeing how this novel, it launched entire genre, but it ended his career because of the emotional turmoil that he went through in writing the story was just, oh, it was insane. You guys have to watch it, especially if you've read In Cold Blood, because it completely entirely changed my perspective on the novel. And once I finished the movie, I went into my English class and I started freaking out about it and telling my teacher, like, you must watch it because it was ridiculous, but I absolutely loved it and it was such a good watch. So some other things that I really briefly watched this month that are not movies but like documentaries type things. I watched a short film called 20-something at the beginning of November. Really the only reason why I watched this was because of Ben Fankhauser. Y'all know I'm a Newsies fan. Ben Fankhauser tweets out that he's in a short film. It's a half an hour long. I'm gonna watch it. And I did. I really loved it. His character is a bit of an ass. I appreciated it because I feel like we always see Ben Fankhauser play like the really sweet and loyal and loving character that you just want to like hug and adore, and his character isn't entirely flawless, which I appreciated. And of course neither is Davy, but like you still love Davy, whereas like Ben's character in this short film is a little bit more because he has a girlfriend that is dealing with mental illness and she's turning 20 years old, and so it's sort of about her getting her life together and sort of figuring out what does she want to do with her life, and her sort of just having a little bit of like an existential crisis a little bit, and it's just sort of following her on her 20th birthday and sort of her friends and everything that she's going through, and her just sort of having to like, yeah, I guess I said it as best I possibly could, get her life back together. I will leave the link down below to the short film if you guys want to watch it. It's absolutely amazing. I think one of the things that I really like about this adaptation is it sort of does what Turtles All the Way Down by John Green does, and I mentioned this in our live show, which we had, which was phenomenal. Thank you all for joining. And it's the way that this movie portrays people with mental illness, and this is something that John Green did as well, where it takes the character, and the character who has mental illness, of course, does have flaws besides their mental illness, but it sort of shows that yes, we have mental illness, we have things going on, and because of that, people like us, because I do have my mental illnesses here and there, aren't entirely aware of other things that are going on around us and our actions and the way that they affect other people, because we're so concerned about this bubble of us and what is it's going inside our own head that we're sort of unaware to the way that our reactions and panic attacks or freakouts when it comes to like anxiety or OCD or other things affect other people. And so you're seeing that a little bit in this short film, and it's sort of then how the people around you react to that, because likely they're going to get upset, but it's the capability for them to be able to understand, being able to work with that person. And Ben's character does try that, but eventually he just sort of goes off on his girlfriend, and I think that it's kind of uncalled for, and that's where I felt like his character was a bit of an ass, because if you are dating someone or in a relationship with someone who has a mental illness, you have to be there for them consistently, and going off on them is not going to help a situation at all. It's talking to them and being really supportive, and I just love the way that he played the character because it shows these very typical things that happen in relationships with people who have mental illness, and I just really enjoyed seeing it on screen. It was an amazing short film. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely hope that you guys all check it out. The link will be down below if you want to watch it. The last sort of like movie-ish thing that I watched was the In You Heights documentary. This was going to be airing on TV, and the minute that I found out about it, I immediately set my DVR and I went and I watched it, and I loved it. I think I actually watched it the same night that I watched Wonder. Like I watched Wonder and I came home and I immediately went to my DVR and went and watched the In the Heights documentary. It was really emotional. To be honest, I think if there's any way to describe this documentary, it is nostalgia to the max. Because so many people have been involved in Hamilton, whether it be like in New York or in Chicago, like for Karen Olivo's case. Seeing how this one musical completely transformed their lives is ridiculous. And like seeing just like how far they've all come, it hit me so hard. Like there was two specific moments that like really hit me. And it was number one when Mandy Gonzalez is like, I want to be known as Mandy Gonzalez from In the Heights, and now she's in Hamilton. And oh god, it hit me so hard. And then when Seth, who was Lafayette in Hamilton, sees this billboard with his face on it for In the Heights, and he starts like freaking out in Times Square. Oh, it hurts so much, but it was such a beautiful moment, and I loved watching the documentary for like all the nostalgia. It just ate away at me. It was just so beautiful, and I loved it. Now, I'm gonna say this, and I'm going to rectify this in 2018. It's gonna happen. I have not entirely listened to In the Heights. I've listened to songs here and there because I listened to Hamilton, and then I was like, well, I haven't listened to In the Heights, and I should, but like I haven't. And I've never gotten around to it because then I got into Dear Evan Hansen, and then I got into Newsies, and I need to listen to Wicked, and I haven't had the time. Because I feel like when you listen to Broadway musicals, it has to be a process. Like you have to sit down and listen to the entire thing, and you gotta immerse yourself. It's not an easy thing. At least for me, I make it more difficult than I need to. So I will listen to all of it at some point. It just hasn't happened yet. But I still love the documentary for the nostalgia, and I appreciated it. And I loved seeing like the original cabinet and all of that, and they were so young, and oh, it just ate me alive. But I loved it. It was great. So TV show that I've been watching, there's really only one that comes to mind, and then one that I sort of like half watched. So the one show that I watched in full was The Bold Type. I watched this in October, and I never got around to discussing it. Two of my friends, who they know who they are, and they're probably watching, hello, they've been watching the show, and they've been discussing it whenever we've met at book events, and I've never been able to add anything. And honestly, the biggest reason why I never started watching the show, because it sounded interesting to me, because it pretty much follows a group of new adult women that are working for a feminist magazine, so journalism in a way, and it sort of follows their struggles that they have to go through in dealing with feminism. So there's a lot of feministic issues that are brought into the storyline, and seeing like these relationships that are formed between these women and the head of this magazine, the really unique relationship that they have, and them sort of going about discovering themselves a little bit more. So I really enjoyed like the aspect of this show and like the message and the main idea behind it. But for me, like there were some episodes where I was like on, where because I'm sort of still growing into myself as a teenager and figuring out what I believe, I just sort of had a hard time like sticking with the show, because there were some points where I was like, I'm not sure how entirely on board I am with some of these things, but I'm growing and I'm learning, and I think that if I watch the show again as an adult, like in several years, my perspective would probably likely change. And I think that's another thing too, is that you're following new adult women, so the issues they're going through are very different than what it is the teenagers will be going through in discovering like their feministic side. So I think that that's kind of an important distinction that you need to make. But I enjoyed the show nonetheless. I loved the friendship between the girls, and I enjoyed the first season, and I'm glad that the show got renewed. I definitely think that I'm going to watch the second and third season, but I'm not going to be like sitting in front of my television when it airs. I'll probably DVR it and then watch the show whenever I get around to it, because it's one of those shows that I enjoyed. I would give it like a high B, like an 88, an 89, maybe like an 89.5, like rounding to an A. But I just, for whatever reason, like I was watching it to get through, but I didn't feel like so connected to the show. I wish that I enjoyed it more, but just I didn't for whatever reason. And maybe it was just the fact that I was like binge watching through all the episodes, and I wasn't able to like have the tension of having to like wait a week for the next episode, because there were some crazy things that went on, and definitely some things that I was really taken aback by that drew me into the show. But I think I just need to see what they do with the second season, because the first seasons usually for shows are kind of shaky, and then the second season, because all the actors are comfortable with each other, comfortable with the plot line and what's going on with the characters, it's much easier to build on to that, and it gives the writers a lot more of a break, because they're not having to start off fresh and create this whole new product. They're sort of able to work off of a foundation they've already built. So I think the second season is definitely going to be better than the first, and I'm really excited to see this show grow. But for me, it was just one of those shows that I feel like I wasn't as drawn in by as I would have liked to have been. I feel like a lot of that is probably just the hesitancy that I have with Freeform, because channel hunters, excuse me, really bad cough. I'm getting over a cold recently. Anyway, I have some trouble trusting Freeform, and so that was one of the reasons why I initially didn't watch this show, because I was hesitant. But it's a good show. I enjoyed it. It just, I think, my hesitancy with Freeform that caused me from like fully lashing onto this show. So the other show that I can think of that I watched this month was Dancing with the Stars. So this show wrapped up, I believe, in November. Yes. I kind of watched the show like half in, half out. I was watching for Jordan Fisher because I'm a Hamill fan and I grew up with Jordan Fisher. Like I watched Disney Channel hardcore as a wee one. So I remember seeing him in Teen Beach Movie and seeing him with like the afro, and oh god, he was so young, and now he's in Hamilton and in Grease Live, and I've loved seeing him grow, and like Liv and Maddie and just like all the things. I adore Jordan Fisher. He's just so sweet and such a wonderful human being, and I was rooting for him the entire time, and he won, and I was so hype about it because like the Ham fam was rooting for him, and it was just, oh, it was the greatest thing to see. I adore him, and I always love seeing him get 10s because he's just so good. Like, even regardless of the fact that he won, he was just clearly the best one. He was amazing. I loved watching him, and I loved his relationship with Lindsay, and their chemistry as just dancers. Oh, they were just amazing. It was so much fun to watch, and I'm so happy that he won. That's really all I'm gonna say here, because I really wasn't watching the show that much or paying attention to anyone else this season, except for Jordan, because I was clearly watching the show for him. But I've watched Dancing with the Stars on and off, and usually now I just watch it if there's like one specific person that I want to support. But I watched the season for him, and he won, and it was the first time that I've ever actually watched a show for someone and they've actually won. So it was a nice feeling, and I love seeing him win, and I adore him. Oh, the high notes that man can hit, because he sang, I believe, a Christmas song during the finale, and the high notes. Oh, the high notes. Okay, anyway, this has just become like a little bit of a hot mess, so we're gonna end this here. So that's about it for my November wrap up. I'm definitely glad I got the opportunity to re-record because this feels like it came together a lot better than it did the first time around that I recorded it. So that's nice. I apologize that this is coming really late. I hate that I didn't have my mic plugged in all the way, and I hate that I was just finding out about it now, but things happen. I'm glad I was able to bring you guys my November wrap up. If you guys want to talk about an amazing book that you read in November, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. If you want to talk about a show that you've been watching or a movie you watched that you really enjoyed, I would love to know. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Goodbye!